Hello. Welcome to the Weather's Cool podcast, where we dive into the world of meteorology, but with a twist. This isn't just about weather forecasts and storm tracking. We're here to hear the stories behind the meteorologists themselves. You'll get to know the people who bring you the weather every day, what drives them, what challenges they've faced, and how their personal journeys shape the work they do. If you're passionate about weather or curious about the lives of those who predict it, you're in the right place. So jump in as we explore the people behind the forecasts and discover what makes meteorologists truly unique. Welcome to Weather's Cool, and this is the Weather's Cool Podcast Project.
Hi, everyone. It's Justin Kiefer from the Podcast Project. And as we have been talking to broadcast meteorologists across the country, it is my honor and pleasure to have Chief Meteorologist James Spann from Alabama. We're just going to say from Alabama. James has been a meteorologist for many, many years. He's a chief meteorologist at ABC 3340, which is a sort of a Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, everywhere in between market. But James, thank you so much for joining the Podcast Project. And sure, I'm glad you're here.
Justin, I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you very much. You know, the Podcast Project, I want to just have broadcast meteorologists like yourself kind of talk about their story. And, you know, typically we go all the way back. And so that's what I want to do. And I know that you've been in television, on television, but I know your career probably didn't start on TV. In fact, I know you began in radio. And so, or perhaps I've misread that. But let's talk a little bit about young James Spann. Where'd you grow up? How did you get interested in the weather?
My story's boring. You get some guys on here, and they're good. My story is somewhat boring, but I had a life-changing event when I was in second grade, and that changed everything. This was a long, long time ago, but the bottom line is my father just walked out one night, and he left me and my mom with basically nothing. He didn't pay child support. And I have no siblings, by the way. I'm an only child. So our family of three became a family of two. And I had to go to work at the age of 7. There were no child labor laws back in the 60s. And so I think that the one good thing that came about as a result of that is the fact that I learned how to work hard. I'm not good at anything I do. Nothing. But I will work harder than anybody else, anybody to accomplish a goal. And I'm thankful for that work ethic. And so kind of morphing into what you were talking about, I've worked all my life since I was 7. So when I was in high school, I took a job at a radio station. And it was interesting. They really hired me because I was a techie, geeky guy that could fix things, even as a high school kid. But they threw me on the air one night, and wow, girls were calling. This was a different era back in those days. And when people listened to the music, they pretty much listened to the radio. And it was the big boss top 40 rock and roll radio station of the day. And I was horrible, just horrible. But that night changed. It was the most magical night of anything I've ever done in terms of my career, was that first night on that AM radio station on a cold November night over 50 years ago. So yes, I worked there for 5 years through high school and college, which helped me come out of my shell. I learned a lot about communication. It was a necessary part, I think, a preparation for what I've done for the rest of my life.
Well, radio is important like that because you have to paint word stories because there are no pictures. So you're telling stories with your voice. And I think that helps really good moving forward in any job, but especially if you're in a broadcast medium.
Yeah, and you're right. And, you know, back in those days, it was radically different the way people consume media, and it was a big deal. And I learned how to try and get rid of my Southern accent. I'm from rural South Alabama. I mean, you look up redneck in the dictionary, my face is on that page. And I've never taken a single class in communication, being some radio or TV guy, nothing. That was my school, basically, those 5 years in radio to learn something about communication and storytelling. And so it was good. And the other thing about that stretch, this was in the decade of the 1970s. The weather was violent. And I've loved weather since I was a child. And my hobby at the same time I was doing that was ham radio. And believe it or not, in the 1970s, we didn't have phones.
Yeah.
And we were it. And so we did storm chasing. Of course, we had no idea what we were doing, which was dangerous. But we would be called in to help after tornado disasters. And goodness gracious, we had a super outbreak in 1974. I was a senior in high school, and this was April 3rd, 1974, and they allowed me 3 days off from high school to go volunteer. I saw things that night that probably a 17-year-old child should not see. I had night terrors for a few years, but I think, again, it was part of the preparation for what I do today. And obviously, when I was in the radio, boy, if there was bad weather, I'd get those warnings on the air. I didn't have any formal knowledge or qualifications to do it, but that's what you do when you're in that radio station. So I'm always thankful for those 5 years of working at that radio station. It was good.
What town was that in Alabama?
Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Okay.
That's a college town. It's the home of the University of Alabama. By the way, my first major in college was electrical engineering because, again, I was a geeky guy that was good at fixing things and tearing things apart. I was a math guy, and I just thought, and I thought weather would be a hobby. Nobody ever told me that weather was a viable career option when I was in high school. And I'm not faulting them. They just didn't know. And so I just thought I'd do weather as a hobby and, chase storms and do that for fun and work for some big utility or something in engineering. So it was, but I did figure out, by the way, you could do what happened when I was at that radio station after 5 years. The local TV station in Tuscaloosa called me and they said, "Do you want to come out here and do weather?" They heard me doing some weather during these big events in the 70s, and they were going to pay me $1.85 an hour. And I was making $1.60 an hour at the radio station. I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. You're going to pay me $1.85 an hour to come do weather, talk about weather. Wow. And so that started it in the summer of 1978. And it's just, it's been 46 years later, I'm still here.
So that's so awesome. In high school, I realized that I was not going to be able to be the first baseman for the Atlanta Braves. And so I realized, well, what do I like? Because like you, it was a hobby. Weather was a hobby. And it was some career guidance out of a junior college in middle Georgia that was like, what do you like to do? Or what do you like? And then so it came down to meteorology. And it's like, okay, let's go that direction. So yeah, unfortunately, the baseball left very early, but where the career went from there has been very fun and very fulfilling for sure. So let's go from that early part then. So you're doing weather on television, and how does the career advance from there? I mean, you've been in Alabama for a long time, but I know that for a while that you were in Texas, I believe Dallas-Fort Worth market for a bit. How did that happen?
Well, it's been a journey. But let me just say this. I'm so thankful for the folks at Mississippi State. They gave me this career. That they came along with that distance learning geoscience program when I desperately needed it. Again, and a lot of the credits transferred nicely from the engineering side, so that having that, the ability to get that formal education was critical. And I'm always faithful for what they've done for me at State. From Tuscaloosa, I only worked there 3 months at the TV station. I got a job offer from Montgomery, Alabama, the Gump.
Okay.
And this was WSFA, TV 12, Montgomery. And when I was growing up in Greenville, Alabama, the small town in South Alabama, that was the only TV station you could pick up back in those days. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm 22 years old, and they're going to offer me the chance to do weather in Montgomery at that station. I thought that this is the peak of my career right here. And so I went down to Montgomery and worked there for a while and actually did some sports. In a smaller market, you do everything. I was horrible at that. And then Birmingham called, the NBC channel in Birmingham. And the next year in 1979, September of 79, I'll never forget that first week. It was the week of a horrific hurricane on the Gulf Coast called Hurricane Frederick. That came right up Mobile Bay, September 12th, 1979. They sent me down there. My first week, they sent me down there. I thought they're trying to get rid of me here. And, back in those days, we had to find, they wanted me in a place where there's going to be a working phone. There were no satellite trucks and, no internet back in those days. But anyway, so I worked at the NBC channel in Birmingham for 5 years. And then I was on a Friday afternoon in 1984, I was called to the front office. And you know this, Justin, when you're called to the front office on a Friday afternoon, what's about to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're about to be axed, fired. I'm thinking, oh, goodness, please. Because we were expecting our first child. And I'm thinking, I can't believe they're going to get rid of me. So I got in the front office and I was scared to death. And the general manager says, "You got a phone call." I'm thinking, what is this? A phone booth? This makes no sense. So I got on his phone and it was the CEO of the corporate entity that owned the TV station. This was Times Mirror Broadcasting, which was an arm of the Los Angeles Times. And the guy said, his name was John McCrory, and he said, "We've been watching you. You're doing a great job, and we're going to promote you to our largest station in Dallas." And I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm not being fired. It's in the weird zone because, but really that doesn't happen much in television. This transfer thing, and I'm thinking, well, okay. And he said, "Oh, by the way, you start Monday."
Come on.
So I went home to tell my wife, and she went into labor that night, and the baby was born the next day. And they still made me be on the air in Dallas Monday. Back in those days, men had no family leave, none. And if I were looking back on it, that was just a bad situation. I just probably should have told him I just can't do it. But I was scared to death, and I did. So, but I worked at the CBS channel in Dallas, and I was in my 20s, had no business being there, chief meteorologist, top 10 market, never been to Dallas before in my life. And goodness, I think the hard part was learning the territory. But one of the things I did for the first few months, I just drove. You can't do weather successfully unless you understand the people, the culture, and the geography and the microclimate. And when you move to a new market like that, it took a lot of work. But we did some good things. And I was competing against some legends. Harold Taft on Channel 5 in Fort Worth. Harold was the legend in Dallas, Fort Worth. Troy Dungan, the bow tie guy on Channel
Yes.
8, WFAA. And let me just say this, that WFAA taught me a lot. I worked for KDFW, Channel 4, but that Channel 8 operation in the 70s or in the 80s was unbelievably good. And I'll share one news story that changed my life. And to this day, that blood runs through my veins. What I saw on Channel 8 that night, we had an L-1011 commercial jet that crashed at DFW Airport, and the guy flew into a thunderstorm. And that changed everything about what we know about wind shear and aviation safety. It changed everything, but it was horrible. There were some that survived, most did not. There was some loss of life on the ground. And I watched Channel 8 cover that wall to wall for hours and hours on that Friday night. And our station was horrible. We did a very poor job, but they were so good at long form coverage. And I said, I need to do weather like that when there are tornadoes flying around here. And nobody did that back then. Nobody, even in that market. And so I'm always thankful for, oddly enough, the competition, Channel 8, Marty Haig, and he was the news director, and what they did over there that kind of got that into my mind. And that, again, when you see me doing tornado coverage, that night still is in my mind and in my soul.
Awesome. I mean, and watching, we'll jump ahead a little bit to the coverage that you provided in April 2011 for those two distinct tornado outbreaks that month. I would watch online, at night after our coverage was over, because I was working in North Florida at the time, and just amazed isn't the word. I was overwhelmed by your ability to go the duration of coverage. And so it's interesting how you tie that back to watching that tragic plane coverage and how you incorporated that into your method, if you will. But also, that's because some people don't watch all the time. So you have to tell that story. And that's one thing I've sort of picked up from you in watching that, is that you sort of reset on a regular basis. Hey, if you're just jumping in, here's what we're doing. And I think that's a great lesson for anybody who does this for a living, is to watch how pros like yourself handle long situations like that.
Well, I just wish that coverage somehow was recorded and they put it online so people could go study that. And not just meteorologists, but journalists, and how to do breaking news the right way. And those reporters knew the story, they knew the territory, they understood aviation. It was just really good. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that. And so we stayed for 2 years. We had a 2-year deal. And my wife and I, a year into it, we just wanted to come home. I'm a homeboy. It was funny. Most people in this business, their dream is to get to a top 10 market. I don't have any interest in any of that. I just don't. And I'm so thankful to have looped through there, because some of the people I met in the weather enterprise, well, they were so smart. Goodness gracious. To this day, we're still connected. But my wife and I just wanted to come home. So at the end of the 2-year hitch, I thought I was done. I honestly thought I was done with TV weather because where do you go?
That's right.
So me and a couple of friends, we bought a couple of radio stations. I did radio when I was in high school. It was still a good business back then. And the one thing about it, Dallas was the money was nice, but I just don't have any interest in all that. But we bought these radio stations in a rural part of Alabama, which brought us back. And I just thought and one thing, when you own the radio station, you can do weather anytime you want to. You can stay on there all day and all night. But after 3 years, the ABC channel in Birmingham made me a really generous offer to come back. And I just felt like that's what I do. I was born to be on a green wall.
Yeah.
And so I've been back in Birmingham since '89.
Yep. Our paths almost crossed. They did for a brief period of time in the mid-90s when I interviewed and was actually offered a job to work with you at the WBRC. And everything seemed fine. And then for some reason, the management where I was at, I was in Tallahassee, Florida at the time, said, yeah, we're not prepared to let you out of your contract to go to do that. And I was crushed because I wanted to come up and do that.
Yeah, it's moving around in TV can be hard because of these contracts, and I understand the need for them. Again, I try and look at our industry from all sides. This is a business, and I understand the corporate side, and I understand our side. But well, that's too bad. We had in the Channel 6 days, they were good. I mean, back in those days, that was the dominant station here. You could put on color bars and get an 80 share. It's one of those kind of things. But I still dreamed of doing was to do weather like they did in Dallas for that plane crash. And they did not give me the green light to go on whenever I wanted to and just stay on. And so jump ahead to 1996, and this was a year of all these affiliation swaps all across the country. The Fox network started, which was a fourth network past ABC, CBS, and NBC. And in our market, it was turmoil. I think we had 4 owners in 5 years at Channel 6 during that time, but the Channel 6 was going Fox. And so the new entity that had the ABC affiliation, they gave me a very kind offer to come to work for them. And this is a startup. I mean, understand, this could fail. This could easily fail. But it was a family-owned operation, and I like that. The family was the Albritton family. Joe Albritton was the patriarch, and Robert Albritton was kind of his son, who was the operating guy. And they came to me and they said, you come to work for us. You can go on TV anytime you want and stay on as long as you want. We own it. This is our word. And I said, wow, okay. And so that was the reason I left this, stable legacy operation to, they didn't even have a transmitter in Birmingham. They took a small station in Tuscaloosa, a small station in Anniston, 33 and 40, and merged it into a Birmingham facility. And the whole thing was just fraught with danger. I mean, I risked my career, and the Albrittons risked a lot of money on it, but it really worked. And so I've been with this deal for since 1996, 28 years. And they've always honored that. And even when the Albrittons sold it, I think it was 2014, which broke my heart because I'm very loyal to the Albritton family. And they sold it to one of the big boys, Sinclair. And it was heartbreaking. But having said that, they have honored that too. Sinclair, they've left me alone. That's the one thing they said, just leave me alone. If you leave me alone, I will work harder than anybody else in this company to maximize shareholder value, take care of the people, and do what we need to do to be successful. And they've honored that. And they still let me go on whenever I want to. So it's been a good ride.
Along the way, you have worked, this is something I was going to get to later, but I don't want to talk about it now because you brought up Mississippi State, which is an awesome program. And I've worked with several meteorologists on air who have come through the broadcast meteorology program and now what it is now, which is even more of a training ground and intensive as far as the education than when when you had the videotapes and the envelopes and mailed it back and forth. There are folks that have worked with you that have moved on to different stations, but I recall when I would watch you online and you'd have several other meteorologists coming in to work with you during a severe weather event, you have always been generous with your sort of knowledge and your career intuition with these other meteorologists who have then left and moved on. How do you feel? I mean, I'm sort of leading the question with the answer, I think. How do you feel about that? What's your feeling with your coworkers, your fellow meteorologists that you work with?
Well, it kind of starts with the interns, these kids we have in college that come in the summer. I love that. And I regret it. In recent years, we've gotten so busy, everything is morphed into, the Twitter and the Facebook and all this other stuff where you're constantly busy. But I love the interns, and I love to hire former interns because I know them. And it's been great to see so many of these young people that started as an intern, and maybe they started as a high school kid that just came up to watch one night. And you hire them and they get good, and then they move on to their market where they become a chief meteorologist somewhere, and it's just a joy. I mean, that's there were some people that encouraged me when I was a kid, and they did things for me, and it's the least we can do just to give back. In fact, at some point, I need to make a list of all these that have made the path from intern to coworker, colleague to going on to big things. And I guess most people, when they think of me, they think of the intern we had in the summer of 2000. There's a really good meteorology program at Valparaiso up in near Chicago in Indiana, and we had John Knox call me. John is a professor at the University of Georgia, and he was at Valpo at the time, and he said, "I've got a kid for you. I think you ought to take in the summer." So we took her in, and she was very shy, and but she was so smart. Her academics were incredibly good. Her name was, and we didn't like her name. Her last name was Zeitgeist. And I said, Ginger, that sounds like something that should be surgically removed or illegal in 10 states. I mean, so we just started calling her Ginger Z, and that stuck. And obviously, you know what happened with her. She's the chief meteorologist for ABC News in New York. She's on Good Morning America. And that's just one example of the joy. And Ginger, out of college, she went to Michigan, then on to Chicago, and from there to New York. So yeah, it's the right thing to do. And it's kind of cool watching them grow up.
Going through the layers of the publicity and legal with ABC News, but Ginger will be a guest on the podcast in the beginning of the year. So looking forward
Ask her about going to the rib joint. We took her to a rib joint, a southern rib joint. It was classic.
Not Dreamland, though.
It was Dreamland.
It was Dreamland. All right.
Yes.
Good.
She didn't know what to do. She's never seen it. They just bring out these massive slabs of ribs, and she didn't know what to do with it. But she was. We knew that something was going to happen with her, whether it was going to be in academia or whatever she wanted to do. She was going to be successful, but she was very shy. And the one thing we found out later that she didn't tell us at the time was that Ginger struggled with depression, and that's one thing we don't talk about in this industry enough is behavioral health. It's just, and it's a shame because we will work high impact events that will have a direct impact on your mental health. If you do this long enough in a tornado prone area, an area with hurricanes or wildfires, and Rick Smith, our Weather Brains colleague out in Norman, he's really kind of taken the lead in this. He's the WCM out there. But anyway, and maybe that was part of her shyness, was the fact that she struggled with depression. But anyway, she's very open about it now. She's done a couple of books. But yeah, you got to help the young people. Come on, they're the future.
When I was as chief meteorologist at WMBB in Panama City, Florida, we were in need of a meteorologist. And there's a young fellow who just graduated from Valpo, but he's now chief meteorologist at WRAG in Memphis. And we hired him. And the reason he looked at and thought the job was good is because we offered to fly him from Chicago to Florida to interview, and nobody else had offered to fly him. And he said, I like that. I'll take this job. And he went from our station in Panama City to Tampa and worked with Paul Delgado for many years. And now he's chief up in Memphis. So the Valparaiso kids are really sharp.
In fact, I'm speaking up there. They have a weather conference every year. I typically do one or two conferences every year where I'll go speak. And I want to say they're on the schedule for March. So I'm looking forward to it. I was up at Northern Illinois the last time. That's in DeKalb, Illinois, which is west of Chicago. But there's some really good programs up in that part of the country.
Yeah. One thing about your schedule, and you've just mentioned it, it's amazing to watch your interaction, not only with professionals or with students, but also just in the community. And I noticed recently on one of your X posts that you clipped a picture of your odometer on your car as it turned over 400,000 miles.
Yeah.
Tell me about that Forerunner.
Well, look. I mean, come on. It's just getting broken in. This is good. I mean, it hit 400,000 back in late November, and the deal is, I'm in schools every day, every single day, 1 to 2 a day. Now, I'm not today because this is when we're recording this, it's a half day for the students. At midday, they're out of there. It's Christmas break, so there's no education today. It's nothing but parties. But I'm in a school every day, sometimes two schools, sometimes three schools. My first open date for a school program is now 2027. The demand is extreme. And I do schools in the Atlanta market, Nashville market, Meridian, Mississippi, Columbus, Tupelo, Mobile, Montgomery. The boundaries have gone away. There are no
Yes.
boundaries.
Yes.
That goes back to getting younger people excited about weather. I see some TV guys that they don't do schools, and they say, well, I don't, I just, I work 8 hours a day. No, no, to be successful, you have to understand, again, the people, the culture, and the geography. And what a wonderful way to learn that, by being in school every day.
That's right.
You're driving, you see things, you will understand, you will have landmarks in your mind when there's tornadoes that will help you. You'll get in those schools, you'll meet teachers, you'll talk with them, you'll talk with the kids, you'll know more about that. It's a win-win-win for everybody. So I burn up these roads. And, and again, I've not slept since I took that job at that radio station. Literally, I've not slept right since November of 1973. I tell people all the time, I've not slept much since 1973, which is true. A typical day for me, I sleep between 1 and 4 a.m., which, by the way, is not healthy.
That's nice.
But I'm up at 4 and do a morning shift at home. I do TV. I'm on the TV morning show. I do 24 radio stations around the country, maintain a fairly high traffic blog, do Facebook Live, YouTube Live, write a discussion. It's a very busy morning shift. And the minute I'm through with that, I'm off. And then, of course, you work the 2 to 11 TV shift, but it's great. I'll never complain. If you love what you do, it's the greatest thing in the world. And I think what changed everything, I started to focus a little more on my physical health. As you know, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 68 years old, and I just felt like I was dying about 10 years ago. No energy. When you just sleep 3 hours a night, come on. Diet was horrible, and so there's a gym right across the street from the TV station. And our son trained there when he played high school baseball. And I thought it was just for athletes, but I found out they had, regular classes. So I started going over there. And at first, boy, that was a train wreck. I literally went back to the station and barfed the third time. I mean, my body couldn't handle it. But I've been doing that for almost 10 years. I back squatted 200 pounds the other day. I'm strong as an ox for an old man.
Man.
I think when you're in good physical health, your cognition is better, your mental
Yes.
cognition. And I've got to have that when there are tornadoes flying around here. And it also increases your energy levels. So I do make a commitment 3 days a week to go to that CrossFit gym and get in there and do some nasty stuff. But it's really, really helped.
That's awesome to hear. I think you're right, because you touched on it earlier with the mental health aspect, but the physical health as well, because the demands of this job pull you in so many different ways, like a sleep schedule, or just the hours are completely sort of different than a normal routine I put air quotes around normal. It's not a 9 to 5 job anywhere for what we do.
No, and if anybody thinks that, you'll never be successful. Back in the 80s, yeah, sure, get your teeth whitened, get you a nice hairstyle, get some nice clothes, look good. Yeah, you can make some big bucks in this business. But the Ron Burgundy days have passed us by. You have to work long hours to be successful, and it is not a problem at all. It is a joy, oddly enough, to get up at 4 o'clock and do what I do for a living. But you got to make some commitments. And the one thing about life, we're all equalized by time. You, me, everybody that's watching this. We have 24 hours in a day. Elon Musk cannot buy a microsecond. Bill Gates cannot buy a microsecond. And how you spend that 24 hours determines who you are. And I think part of it, we have to be sure our physical health is okay. And the other thing, too, is giving back. I mean, goodness, you've got to, instead of worrying about you got to have a servant's heart to be successful to do this. You have to serve the people and get involved in some things where you're doing that. A lot of people don't know this about me. I have been for 19 years the chairman of the board of a major hospital, which is a very time consuming task, but it's a great thing to do. I took that because I wanted to learn trauma, how people die in tornadoes from ER docs. And it was a 2-year hitch, and it's kind of morphed into a 19. It'll be 20 next summer. But it's been a great ride. I've fallen in love with the health industry. It's great.
I hear you. I think in my mind, I'm thinking you might want to take on a few more things.
Well, it's again, time management is key. You've got to be able to manage it right. And again, I've been married for 43 years, and we raised 2 boys. Of course, they're grown now, and you've got to spend some time with your family, and you have to prioritize everything. And you can do this, but you again, sometimes sleep. And let me stress, Justin, I don't recommend anybody get 3 hours of sleep a night. That's not good. Again, I know a lot of doctors, and they will tell you that's not good. But if you focus on your physical health, which in turn will help your mental health, that's a big deal. Yeah, I could blow off that gym, just blow it off. I ain't got time for that, but I won't live much. I told him I won't live much longer, but I feel better now than I felt when I was 30 years old. I'm energized. I feel better than I've probably ever felt in my life. So I'm very blessed.
Well, that's awesome to hear, man. We have these dogs. You may or may not hear them in the background, and I walk them every day. Where the climate that I'm in right now, where we live, 32 with mixed precip. I'm out there bundled up. You get the foul weather gear on. You take your dog for a walk, 45 minutes, but every single day. And I agree with you. I feel better now, health wise, than I did 30 years ago, for sure.
And of course, we shouldn't be saying this because we'll drop dead later today, but we will enjoy it while we can.
One of the things that struck me, I want to talk a little bit about April 2011 because I work with Ken Weathers in Knoxville, Tennessee, at the ABC affiliate there. That April 27th, 28th for them was traumatic as well for East Tennessee, but obviously from north to south and top to bottom, east to west, Alabama, under the just most duress I've ever seen until I worked a Category 5 hurricane that hit my town. But I want to talk a little bit about how you handle your composure, because I'm going to jump ahead to something else a little bit later. But during events like that, when you know you've got to get the information out, but you also know what's happening on the ground because you've seen so many. What's that? I'm just going to ask it straight out. What's that like live on the air in your mind as you're saying those words?
Well, that day, the one thing about that day, again, when I was in high school, I experienced a day like that, which I think was good in that I've lived through that before, that deal in 1974. But going into it, you don't know. You don't know this is going to be a day of history, a historic outbreak. You know it's going to be a high-end threat, sure, but you never know. But the one thing I think people need to understand about, that day, if you watch the YouTube coverage, we were so busy. We were so busy. We did not have time to get hung up in the history of the day, the emotion of the day. We didn't. We quite frankly, I missed it because I was so busy. You're looking, and if you've ever watched, you see that I've got a laptop in front of me and I've got 6 chat sessions from National Weather Service offices open. I've got a Slack session with our internal spotters, the sky watchers in the field. I've got, all these video feeds from dash cams, our TV station folks out in the field I'm looking at. And then you've got the social media thing, which was a thing in 2011. The iPhone came along in 2007. So the iPhone was 4 years old. And we did have, Twitter and Facebook back then. And you're looking at all that. And, every CPU cycle in my little pea brain has to be used to process all that incoming information and tell a coherent story. So I never really thought about the history of the day until after it was over. And you just got to stay focused. But I will say that what a lot of people don't know about that day, the morning round of storms, we had really 2 rounds. We had the morning round and then the afternoon, evening round. Let me rephrase that. I didn't expect the morning to be that bad. It was rough. We had 5 people that were killed in the morning, and we had severe damage to the infrastructure. We got off the air for a little brief time at midday. And all these engineers came in there streaming into the studio telling us everything that wasn't working. We lost microwave paths, cameras, so much was down. And I finally said, guys, stop, time out. I need to know what is working because we got to get through, a horrible afternoon and evening here. And I will say those guys really did amazing work in that little 3-hour break where they got a lot of the cameras back online, which in turn showed some of these violent tornadoes that afternoon. But in the afternoon and evening went pretty much as we thought. It was just horrific. And the problem when you've got multiple strong, violent tornadoes down at the same time.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Right.
You know, how do you budget your time? Do you triple box, quadruple box, go to 8 boxes? Is that confusing? And a lot of this is a social science question, which I'm so thankful for these social scientists. And there's no, and I tell Jason, the guy that was in there with me, you know, don't ever go back and play mental gymnastics. Obviously, we didn't do everything right because 252 people died on my watch in one day from tornadoes here. We had 62 tornadoes, 252 was the death toll. Obviously, and the warnings were darn good. In some cases, the lead time was 30, 35, 40, 45 minutes, which is insane. That the average lead time here is 12 to 15 minutes. And yet, despite the excellent warnings, every one of those, all 62, the death toll was that high. And I think the key thing we learned that day was the fact that physical science is not enough. You know, again, my first major was electrical engineering, and I finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about human behavior, and yet we're asking people to modify their behavior to protect their life, and maybe we're not doing it right. So these brilliant social scientists have really helped us since that day 13 years ago.
Well, I know that as working in Panama City as Hurricane Michael hit, you just don't know if like the social science part of that. It's like, is the message that you've said over and over again for the last 24 hours been enough to have people take it seriously? Because you see the storm in the Gulf, and people, I guess Alabama's a little different with tornadoes because you've had multiple outbreaks of violent tornadoes, but everybody was banking their memory up against a hurricane that was 20 years prior to that, Hurricane Opal. And so, oh, we lived through Opal, everything will be fine. It's like, well, no, this is not Opal. It's going to be really bad. And so so in my memory was, have I said enough? Have I done enough? And then we get knocked off the air, and it's like, well, gosh, the people upstream in Mariana and in Donaldsonville, Georgia, where it's going, you know, they have no idea now, you know. So I was very, that social science aspect of it's very important to understand.
I will tell you it's critical. We have to have this interdisciplinary approach to be successful in mitigating loss of life. We have to be able to we have to be able to change. A lot of us have been doing this for a long time and we're thinking we know everything. Well, no, we don't. And you better be willing to change and understand the messaging might be different in 1 year than it is today, and how people consume media and what you tell them. And society is changing like a meteor streaking through the night. It's rough out there. I mean, you don't believe that? Follow me on Facebook. You'll see.
We're going to come to that soon.
And so, you know, but I'm so thankful for people like Dr. Laura Myers and Dr. Kim Cloko McLean,
Yes.
these longtime friends and good associates that have been just so good to help me be better. And again, back on that day, I don't, you know, play the blame game. It's people think that I do, but I really don't. But I will say this, I have memorized almost every single name. 252 people died. I know their names. I know their stories. I've met many of their surviving family members. And let me tell you this, it is very motivating for me. And, you know, that's one thing that I'm very energized to help keep building momentum to make the warning process better. We're fighting some horrible things right now, horrible, horrible things. The biggest thing we're fighting right now, it's the social media hyperbole from rogue accounts that have, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of followers that are constantly predicting doom and gloom, you know, 10 to 15 days in advance. There's always a hurricane coming. There's always a winter storm coming. There's always a tornado outbreak coming. And of course, they monetize their accounts, and that's how they make money. It's engagement and, you know, likes and shares and page views. Some people buy into this stuff, and it's crying wolf. You constantly say there's a tornado outbreak in 10 days. Tornado. After a while, people just stop listening. You're crying wolf. And we can't control that. I understand that. That horse is out of the barn. It's never going to come back in. But as a professional weather enterprise, we have to stay away from that stuff. And I'll chase a rabbit. I probably shouldn't say this here.
That's okay.
But some of these corporate folks in the TV, the old school TV world, you know, they're mandating that these meteorologists declare code red, weather emergency, first warn, first alert, emergency days, high impact, kiss your backside goodbye days. When there's fog, when it's raining, what's the matter with these people? And they're under pressure to do a certain number of these things in a month.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're in big trouble. And so if there's no high impact weather, you have to invent it or make people think that a foggy morning is a code red weather emergency day.
Right.
And
Right.
somehow these people think that that's going to draw people to these old school television newscasts. No,
No,
it's going to drive them away.
I'm away. You're absolutely right.
It's again, the Ron Burgundy days have ended. Good evening. Here's the news. That stuff's a product of a bygone era. And if they can't innovate their way into a new world, it's like horse and buggy days. They won't be around much longer. And when those retransmission fees go away, it's a problem. And so if there's any way, if you're a professional, please stay away from that stuff. And again, to Sinclair's credit, they have never mandated that in my shop, never. And I'm very thankful for that.
There was an ownership group that did a lot of like focus group surveys to come up with their avatar of who the person is that consumes the news, right? And so they put this person on a box, but then they posted it on styrofoam boards that were put all over newsrooms. This is what they do. This is who they are. This is what they drive. And it fomented that, well, if there's some sort of weather that's going to impact that person's life on their way to school, then you have to elevate the message of the forecast to weather alert, wear, warning, whatever it is.
Code red.
Code red. It's like, let's give them the information and hope they're smart enough to figure it out, kind of thing.
And the other thing too, that one of the consultant guys came in and said, you need to tell people how to dress. Now let's review this. So you're saying the audience, they don't have enough sense to know how to dress themselves. And we're going to treat them like an idiot on the air. At 9 o'clock, you must wear mittens and gloves. At 10 o'clock, you must take your mittens off. At 3 o'clock, you need to have your... No! If we treat them like idiots, they're going to think we're idiots. I actually have faith in the people that follow me that they know how to dress themselves.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. I'm sure
it's just like, guys, I'm telling you, we need to rethink this whole thing. And again, let me just say, and I'm not negative on the future for people that want to do what I've done. I think what will emerge from this is going to be wonderful, wonderful. You look at that, what the Tennessee Valley weather guys are doing. No transmitter. What they're doing, they've got it right. They have a servant's heart. They're producing products and services that's relevant to the people. They're not focused on them. They're focused on the people that they serve. They're in the black. They're making good money. Their severe weather coverage is second to none. It's an example of where this whole thing is going. And we can do this, and we can have good salaries, and there's a great future. I want the young people to understand there is great hope and great future, but it's not going to be Ron Burgundy. Good evening.
That's right. So I want to take a few more minutes of your time to talk about something that I love to follow. I don't engage, but I love to follow. And that is, we'll call them trolls. But for a while, I believe that you just sort of ignored them. And then you began to engage with them in regard to either their criticism or their just hype of something that you may or may not have said. And we'll get to the chemtrail events eventually. But something, unless I'm missing it, I think something happened in the way you looked at it, where you said, you know what, I'm going to take this head on. If we could just spend a moment there and just let me hear what you think about the folks that decide that they're going to pick up a keyboard and type something to you.
Well, and let me say that nobody knows the right way to handle this. Nobody. You have to have this odd combination of sass and grace to live in social media these days. And I do think Ginger Z does it better than anybody. If you ever watch how she handles the trolls, she's really good at it. But my problem is this. Again, I am from rural South Alabama. I am from Greenville, Alabama. If you ever watch Forrest Gump, Greenbow, Alabama, Winston Groom patterned Greenbow after Greenville, all right? And in Greenville, we were taught how to stand up to a bully. And that'll stop the bullying. You stand up to him. And that's always in my blood. It's in my veins. So after a while, you take a beating. It's brutal. I mean, I cut off a basketball game on Christmas Day in 2015. This was an NBA game. Christmas Day, joy to the world, peace on earth. The first email I got, and this was for a tornado warning, and it was a pretty bad situation. We could have had some pretty bad loss of life, and we didn't. The warning process worked that day. The first email said, you should have been aborted by a coat hanger. And this is the kind of stuff we get on a regular basis. And after a while, even if you're an old crusty guy like me, it can crawl up in your head. And at some point, you need to just clap back a little bit here.
Yeah.
So, and most of the stuff, I don't It just goes, I'm too busy to deal with it. But every once in a while, you just take a choice hater and let the world see who, if it's on the Twitter, I'll just retweet it, let the world see it. And on occasion on the other platforms, and I never dox anybody, never. I'll blurt out the names and everything. But you know my routine. It's good morning to everybody but this guy.
This guy.
Yeah, and you'll put the hate and the vitriol that you get on there, and I'll blur out his name and everything. But I just think people need to see what we're receiving, and maybe they'll think twice about sending it, because if you send us a bunch of hate stuff, it's nothing new. And the other thing I tell people all the time, you can't hurt my feelings. No matter what you say, you cannot hurt my feelings because I have no feelings left to hurt. There's nothing left. So I just think every once in a while, a little pushback against the trolls is, and we live in an angry society. People are angry right now. They want to fight. They want to hurt you verbally. And some people want to hurt you physically. For the threats that are credible by nature of my employment agreement, I have to turn those into the cybercrime folks. But yeah, I'll post a picture of a sunset and they're fighting in 5 minutes about Trump or vaccines or drones or
Right.
whatever. And it's like as a nation, we need to sit back and take a big, deep breath and just relax.
Had to spend an inordinate amount of time one year trying to figure out where to put a weather crawl during sporting events, because the NBA puts all the information at the bottom of the screen, but IndyCar puts their stuff across the top of the screen. And so you have to know what programming you're into, where to put the crawl at the top or the bottom, you know?
Great.
I was going to talk about chemtrails, but I'm not going to do it now.
Well, look, let me just say this. These people are mean. I mean, something has changed in society. Something has changed. And I've got Kim McLean, social scientist, I have tasked her with finding out what has changed here. But you do have a subset of the population that believe that basically clouds don't exist. Everything you see is the government spraying our skies to poison our minds and control our actions, control the weather, generate hurricanes. They almost become delusional, and it's like they're incapable. What we're missing in this country, it's the ability to critically think. There was a course called critical thinking when I was in school, greatest course ever. Listen, I learned to think for myself. I don't care what politician, right wing, left wing, no wing, I don't care. I think for myself. And I'm capable of making decisions on my own. And as a nation, we've just started to follow these mindless people, and we become lemmings. I don't know, but yeah, the chemtrail people, they're mean. I mean, they're mean. They have a chemtrail action team. And if they see a meteorologist posting a picture of cirrus clouds, or, oh goodness, if there's a contrail up there, they will come after you, and it's a mob. And some of them do make direct threats. They'll say, if you don't stop lying about the government controlling our minds and our skies and poisoning us, and of course they say we're taking big money from the federal government, and I'm waiting on that first check.
Yes, yeah, like some of that government money.
But they say, if you don't stop lying about this, then you're in grave danger.
Goodness.
And just like, guys, please. Yeah, it is
offering up at least a little bit of critical thinking, like, before there was jet flight, or on days when there's, a completely cloudless sky and the high pressure is in such an alignment that there isn't that, that certain atmospheric condition that promotes contrail formation, that they turn them all off that day. It's like, well, wait a minute now. Let's think critically about that just a bit. But you're right. They're divided.
It is what it is. And again, the one thing about it, I'm equally attacked from left wingers and right wingers. So maybe I'm doing it right. And I can't stand politics. I mean,
if you're taking hits from both sides, and you're probably
and they latch onto these politicians that in their minds are these mental giants that understand atmospheric science, when in reality they know nothing about it. They don't even know how the atmosphere works. But again, it is what it is.
One time I had, back since when spell check didn't exist in some of the computer programs where we typed in our own forecast information, I think I was going to put the word warm, but I inadvertently left off the M and it came out war. And that was the graphic that aired. And I immediately got an email. This was back in early 2000s, that I was part of the government conspiracy to invade Iran or Iraq because I used the word war in my graphic.
And you're taking the big bucks too. Yeah. From the government.
That's right. Well, this has been a very, very fast hour so far. I have just a couple of extra little questions for you. You've talked about your family. There's a poignant moment that I'm not quite sure the year, but it's been recent, when you're your own home was impacted by a tornado or at least a severe thunderstorm. If you don't have to answer this question, but can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, listen, tornadoes happen to real people at a real place at a real time, and it's not always somebody else. Everybody's got an excuse why a tornado doesn't come down their street. It's usually well, I've got a mountain over here, and I've got a lake over here, and my grandmama says tornadoes always split and go around here. No, they don't. That's insane. Yeah. But yeah, our house was hit by an EF3. This was a big one. This was on March 25th of 2021. Which I texted my wife, and we have a shelter. By the grace of God, we have a good tornado shelter here. And I said, shelter now. And she was already there. But you're human. You don't know what's going to happen. And I knew my wife was okay. And of course, our kids are grown. So she was here by herself. And you just wonder when she gets out of that thing, what's she going to see? Is there anything left? I mean, what's it going to look like? It was the greatest distraction of a lifetime. I've been doing this 46 years. I've never been that distracted. And 6 people died that day, by the way. It was a rough day.
My goodness.
And I just wonder, I just know that I was not at the top of my game. But I saw the general manager of the TV station in the studio, and he kind of was waving a phone, and I knew that, that I would kind of find out. And as it turns out, the roof stayed on the house, which was an incredible blessing because so many people out here lost the roof. And when the roof goes away, the walls go away, and you are in a hotel for at least a year.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and there were trees that we had the damage was horrible. But we were so blessed in the fact that we could live here while they repaired everything. Of course, we had no power for days, but I'll never forget that there was an army of people that showed up out here the next day. A couple of them I knew, most of them I didn't know. I don't know where they came from. Heavy equipment to start getting trees off the house, to clear paths we could get in here. I will never forget the kindness of these people. And that's what the world ought to be like. I mean, that was just incredible. And I will say one positive, Justin, we now have a great sunset view. We used to live kind of out in the woods. Now, man, to the southwest, we get a great path down there, so we can see a nice sunset. So you have to look at all the positives. And we didn't have any loss of life in this particular section of Birmingham, which, again, 6 people did die that day in Ohatchee. But in the case of this one, a very densely populated part of the city, people heard the warning, they responded, they got into a safe place, and we didn't have loss of life. And we can fix a house, but we can't get another person. So,
No.
But it was a rough day.
That was it. You're on the air, and you see the radar presentation, and because the technology has gotten so good that you're down to where you can really identify neighborhoods and streets, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is going to come very close to where my home is. And I know that when I worked through Hurricane Michael, though my family had moved and evacuated away from the coast and were up in Middle Tennessee at the time, I knew where these winds were, and I knew the people who lived and stayed in their homes, what was happening. And you go, so I'm on the air processing that, going, well, gosh, this is, their house is going to come down, but I got to keep talking about this storm. The distraction is palpable.
It is. And staying focused, it can be so hard when you've got that. And then again, if people could just see what we see during a tornado outbreak on those screens in front of us and that green wall, your head would explode. And you got to process all this information on the fly and determine what's on the video that you're showing. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Does it help tell a story? And again, the bottom line is we're here to mitigate loss of life. That's the number one reason we're here. And whatever you do, it's got to be in an effort to maximize that. And anytime we have a tornado day here, that's the metric. That's the only thing you really look at to start with. Did anybody die? And I tell kids all the time when I'm in these schools, hey, I will get you a new house, but I cannot get another you. And so, but yeah, it's never a good day when your house is hit by an EF3. It's not a good day.
Not be, and I imagine the 400,000 miles on the car gives you an opportunity to know every road and every bend in every neighborhood across your state and beyond. To where
and listen, here's the deal. You can't get on the stream and say, all right, we got a tornado 14 miles southwest of Clanton. Nobody knows where that is, even if you've lived in Chilton County all your life. You don't know where that is, but if you say it's pretty close to Jim's Pit Barbecue, everybody in Billingsley, Alabama, they know where that is. And if you can call out a barbecue joint, a Walmart, a barn, any landmark that people understand, and the only way, and you just can't do that by looking at a map. you have to get out there and drive these roads. And that's why there's such a great benefit in, being on the road every day. Yesterday, I was in Marion, Alabama, Perry County, and beautiful drive in the country. And I've been down that road a gazillion times, but sometimes you'll see things you haven't seen before, and things do change. You need to refresh yourself on all this. So yeah, the road thing is a big deal.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, look, I won't keep a whole lot more of your time. Maybe one more minute of a couple of personal questions. You've been doing this for a few years. What's the future hold for James Spann? You're doing everything every day all by yourself, more than any human being I've ever known. What's the future for you? What's going on for you now?
I'm just getting started. I mean, listen, I have no desire to stop. But the one thing I want to do, of course, obviously, we've got a lot of work to do in the warning process, a lot. And as everything changes. And the other thing I want to do is give these students coming out of college that are in meteorology, that want to do what I've done. I want to give them hope in the future. I want to give them a business model, not this train wreck of dying business model. I want to give them something that's robust, where they can feel confident coming in here knowing that they've got a great future. And so, I want to work with Sinclair and, ultimately kind of get my foot in both of these, the new world and stay in the old world, to help them. They've been great to work for. So no, I'm just getting started. I'm 68. And again, I feel better than when I was 30. And as long as I've got the mental cognition and the physical health, I'm all in. Now, when that goes downhill, I'm done. When I can't recall the name of a street in East Aboga, Alabama, or if I can't recall the name of a town that's near Andalusia, I have to stop, because that's dangerous. Somebody could get hurt doing that. But I'm all in. Let's go. I mean, let's roll.
I know the answer to this question. You probably don't play golf, do you?
I have zero time. I do play tennis. Again, part of the physical thing is Sunday evenings. Every Sunday evening, I will play tennis. Same group of people I played with for years and years. And if you look at us from a distance, man, we look good. Up close, we're not that good. We just hit the thing hard. But I play tennis every Sunday evening. We actually, there's a golf course. I can see a golf course out my window here, but I don't.
Yeah.
It just takes too long. The only courses I play have windmills and pirate ships.
And there you go. And you turn your putter and the ball in when you're done. It's a great thing. Well, listen, I'm thrilled that you joined us on the podcast project. I am honored to just have you speak about your life and your career. I'm looking forward to publishing this, getting people to hear your story and the story of Alabama, because you have been a resource and a treasure for those folks for many, many years. And so I appreciate you hopping on board here today.
Well, it's fun. This is good. For those that don't, we're recording this right before Christmas, and I've got to morph from this into a Weather Brains episode. We're recording next week's show this morning because I'm on vacation next week. So, but anyway, it's been great, Justin. Thanks for the conversation. This was good.
It's been my pleasure. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your career.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Weather School Podcast Project. To see all the episodes of the Podcast Project, please visit school.com/weatherschool/about. Become a member and join the Weather School community.